It's not too late until it is. Imagine this scenario. You're old, near the end of your life, maybe terminally ill, and you realize that time is up. And it's in that moment that so many tell stories about enlightenment, but the kind of enlightenment that does us no good. The kind of enlightenment that leads to regrets. Why? Because all the stories and scenarios we hear about end-of-life realizations are filled with all the things I wish I would have done, or wish I would have done instead of doing the things that I did. And we know this when we're 30, 40, or 50 years of age. We see this all over the place, and yet it doesn't change us, and we don't change or adjust so that we can have the kind of enlightenment without the cautionary tale of before it's too late.
Like, never too late kind of thing.
Yeah, never too late to start over.
So how can we escape the it's too late for me kind of regret that hits us, well, when it's too late?
You kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you, Will. That's why I'm not talking right now about some girl I saw at a bar 20 years ago and how I always regretted not going over and talking to her.
I've tried and failed and tried and succeeded in second, third, and fourth careers. A lot of do-overs in my life. And if you're honest with yourself, you realize that you're going to have to do a lot of do-overs in your life. And I've studied what social scientists and psychologists and a lot of mentors have given me as input, where I've mapped out what is, for me, a 3-part formula that I want to share with you before it's too late, about how to live a life that when you reach the end of it, whenever it is, it's not an end with regrets. And stick around to the end and I'll share with you some metrics, the difference between those who try and fail, those who try, fail, and end up succeeding, and the difference between them. It is amazing, and I don't use the word amazing a lot, but these metrics are amazing. So stick around. But in the meantime, tap the like button and let's get into it. Hi, I'm James Callahan, and this is the Doover Show. And I have a scenario, a question to put to you about the end of your life. Yes, I want to know, what do you imagine you will have regrets about? Now, in my life, I have been with those who are terminally ill, who've been approaching death, who have seen it coming, and I've even held the hand of more people than I want to count, family and friends, as they've taken their last breath. And one thing I've discovered is that some have regrets, but not all of them. Not all of them look back at their life and say things like, will you regret not working more? Should you have said I love you more to more people? You wish you had kept up with friends? Are you sorry you didn't take more risks instead of playing it safe? Or spending so much time on YouTube? Do you think any of us are going to look at the end of our life and regret not watching more Mr. Beast videos? Or how about saving money? If I'd only put away $100 a month for 40 years and let it invest and grow, I'd have $500,000 right now and not end my life broke and poor. Will you regret the road not taken because you remember reading Robert Frost's poem years ago and you wonder, if I'd taken the other path in the wood? 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. And it ends, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. But what if we can learn from all of this end-of-life regret enlightenment today? We can take the cautionary tale and it can actually make a difference in our life. You know, the cautionary tale, the scary story about don't let this happen to you. And we're supposed to be able to learn from the experience of others. First, the reality check is that certain things are too late for some of us. Yeah, I know it's a funny way to start. It's not too late formula with, yes, it's too late. But some things are too late. Some things are not possible for us. And the sooner we can realize and cut that loss, the better off we'll be. It can be too late. You can have too little money. You can be too short, too big. Some of us just can't sing, can't talk in front of crowds. And I know some people that talk in front of crowds that don't have anything to say, and yet they still talk in front of crowds. We could spend hours making a list of all the things we can't do, all the things, and credit those as our regrets. But none of them will help you today or at the end. So why is it that we affix the wrong meaning to certain things and end up regretting them? It's because we're looking for meaning in things that we shouldn't be finding meaning in. I know it's a circle, but follow me on this one.
It's funny, I learnt the most about him when I was packing up his house. All his belongings, like his whole life. And I found this stash of pocket notebooks that he must have taken with him when he was on tour. And full of all these details, like the palm trees he'd seen, or escargot he'd tried, or this time the ocean looked purple. And the way he wrote everything, it was like a reminder, like, don't forget this moment, or don't forget this interesting, strange detail. Hundreds of these entries.
Chef Terry?
And he'd sign each one off the same way every time.
Chef?
Yes, chef.
Without getting too philosophical, where we find meaning is tied to needing important things to be different than ordinary things. And that means we miss the ordinary things, the small things, because we're always chasing the big, hard to imagine things, usually the things we see in someone else's life. And that means turning an idea of something that we want to find meaningful, turning it into action, turning it into a habit. Here's the explanation. 99% of what you and I do every single day in our life is done without thought. It's a habit. It's something we've added to our life, a little thing, and one little thing on top of another little thing, and it accounts for 99% of how we live our life. The alternative is to make every decision brand new every single time, and that leads to, anxiety. And that is the primary cause of decision fatigue. I've done a video on it. I'll tag it at the end of this video. But most of us, if we never get off the starting line, are stuck in that decision fatigue mode. But that means that somewhere in between nothing and everything, we have room. We have to create room for things that we want to do so that they don't lead to regrets. The second part of the it's not too late formula is realizing that what keeps us back is embarrassment or self-consciousness. That is, we can be so aware of ourselves and our surroundings and the people around us that it causes us to avoid embarrassment rather than to embrace it. One of the best ways I've learned to embrace embarrassment is having the 5 children that we have. And that is doing silly things that I couldn't do in a professional context, but I did with my children. Everything from dad jokes to acting out things to singing High School Musical at the top of my lungs, driving who knows where for some lesson or soccer game or to get an ice cream cone. Doing things that are embarrassing and learning to keep doing them without apology. There's a fancy word people have been using more and more recently, and that is unapologetic. The second part of this 3-part formula of learning how it's not too late is to embrace an unapologetic approach to the things that you're willing to try. First, because other people are too scared to try them. There is nothing wrong with trying something and not succeeding. The embarrassment comes when you decide you're never going to do it in the first place because you don't want to face the scrutiny or embarrassment of others. So let me add something that's even more personal. I screwed up the first 2 decades of my life. Absolutely destroyed them. I couldn't focus, couldn't keep myself involved in things. I obsessed about the things I wanted to obsess about, but they were rarely the things that I was supposed to be interested in during the first 20 years of my life. Now, when I was young, the number one comment on every report card through all of grade school was I wasn't living up to my potential. If you've ever been told that, welcome to the club. Now, when I got to high school, they just stopped thinking I wasn't living up to my potential, and they just said I was too stupid to do this. And they said I should probably drop out. So I did. I'm a high school dropout. I didn't know any other high school dropouts. There isn't a club or support group for high school dropouts, or at least there wasn't when I did it. But out of that, I learned something, and that was I don't have anything to be embarrassed about. Because I didn't care about school, and I didn't care about the people who cared about school until I did eventually. And that was the chip on my shoulder that got me out of high school, getting my GED, finishing a 4-year college degree in 3 years, getting a master's degree, and pursuing a PhD nonstop from that point on. But the basis of it was I was not embarrassed. In fact, I became a little secretly proud, at least a little defiant, remember the chip on the shoulder, about the thing that everyone told me I couldn't do. I remember sitting with one of my college professors, nice guy, but a jerk, a nice guy in other respects. And I told him, hey, I want to go for a master's degree and maybe for a PhD. And he said, Oh, I really don't think you can do that with your educational history. That flipped the switch for me. And I said, I didn't say it to him, I was trying to be nice. I said, I'm going to do it. And I did it. So there, you crabby old professor who didn't think I could do it. I did it. By the way, how do you know somebody is a high school dropout? Well, besides that they make $1 million plus less than people who have some college over their working life, how do you know? It's the same way you know somebody does CrossFit or maybe they're a vegan. They tell you. You know who you are. Now, before this turns into another Gary Vee video about how it's not too late, and yes, he has videos about this too, it has to do with what we're willing to do when we realize this is not working out. And it has to do with something called the sunk cost fallacy. Behavioral economics makes a big deal of this, but the sunk cost fallacy is the idea that when we realize that we're doing something, spending energy, time, money on something, and it's not working out, we have a decision to make, whether or not we double down and put more money, more time, more energy into something that's not working, or we cut our losses and walk away. So imagine you find a movie on Netflix and you start to watch it, and after 30 minutes of it, you realize, this movie's really not for me. I'm really not interested in it. Well, if you decide at that point, but I've already spent 30 minutes and there's only about an hour left on the movie, I might as well finish it. That's the sunk cost fallacy. We think because we put something into it, that if we have to admit that we're wrong, it'll be embarrassing and we'll have to say, oh, I wasted time, rather than I saved myself the rest of the hour of a bad movie that just wasn't for me. You see, we do that to avoid having to admit we were wrong about something. Now, it happens all the time in the investment world where we'll pick a stock, we'll hear something, we'll get a tip, and we'll think, yeah, that's going to be the next to the moon stock. And it goes down instead of up in price. And it's at that time that we either cut our losses and admit we were wrong or early. In the investing world, the word early is synonymous with the word wrong. So if you're in that situation, but you say, no, I'm not going to admit I'm wrong, I'm going to put more money into this, that's the sunk cost fallacy. And the same thing happens in our lives. When we put ourselves in a mode to do something, we invest time and energy, and for example, the field evaporates, or there's no demand in the field, or we want to be a teacher, but we also want to be a millionaire, but we realize that we will never become a millionaire by teaching second graders. Now, what that means is we have to admit one of those two things. Do you want to be a teacher or do you want to be a millionaire? Because the two don't usually go together. And that brings us to the third part of the three-part formula, it's not too late, and that is learning to cut our losses and learning what to do with our losses so that we don't simply create a list of lifelong regrets. Here's the big takeaway. When we do cut our losses, we really never start again at zero. We have acquired some experience, some practices, maybe learned some bad habits, but we've also acquired things that can be useful in another try, in another area, in something else that we're going to assign meaning and significance to, that we are going to choose rather than let other people choose for us. These transferable skills, the things that we have learned in one thing, even if it didn't work out, those transferable skills are at the heart of the quality of life that you are looking for if you're involved in do-overs and if you want to avoid a life that ends with a list of regrets. Now, I promise that if you watch to this point, I would share with you some amazing metrics from the field of entrepreneurs and startups, and a series of studies done about millions of small business startups in retail and entrepreneurial spaces. And researchers have discovered that, most of these startups fail. In the survey of startup postmortems, that is, after they've died, a business journal concluded that there was rarely one reason for a single startup's failure, but there is a pattern, and the pattern for startup applies to our personal life and our do-overs as well. You see, what this three-part formula of It's Not Too Late really involves is learning to become an entrepreneur of our own life, our life skills, and our own things that we find meaningful and significant. Creating our own list and owning up to it, because if we fail, we have failed. But here's the kicker about all the reasons why startups and entrepreneurs like us, entrepreneuring, is that a word? It should be, our own lives, is that 71% of business startups by entrepreneurs fail and never try a second time. And those who do try a second time but don't change anything, just try to reiterate it a second time, copy and paste, fail at the same rate as they failed the first time. And here's where a big roadblock pops up in our way about how we handle failure, and that is, it's called the attribution fallacy. Okay, what it is, if you see somebody else try something and they fail, we have a tendency to assign it to their lack of character, their effort, their personality. They've got problems, and that's why they failed. But when we fail, we attribute it to things beyond our control, the market, the economy, a politician, some bad, evil actor. We always think somebody's out there that has it against us. And we attribute our failure not to our personal shortcomings or our lack of ability, but we attribute it to, we had it all, but somebody made it impossible for me. That is the attribution fallacy, and that's what we often succumb to. And when we arrive at the conclusion, well, it was impossible to succeed because of things beyond my control, we put something else on our list of regrets, and now it's associated with people that we blame or conditions that we blame. And that doesn't lead to the kind of exercise that we need to improve. That leads to frustration and quitting. Now, in research from 2 University of Michigan business profs, surveying the records of more than 2 million small businesses by entrepreneurs in Texas, those who succeeded or were successful had experience, but not experience at necessarily succeeding. This is where it gets interesting. So 2.5 million businesses opened over a 22-year time span in this study that they looked at, and 2.2 million of them closed. That's a failure rate of almost 90%. Most businesses staying open for just 24 months, and the average that they stayed open was just over 3 years. Now, that's not a great track record, and it doesn't show a lot of experience that leads to success. But that's where we're wrong. The experience that mattered was this: those who did succeed eventually tried a second, third, or fourth time and changed their approach each time. Have you ever heard the phrase serial entrepreneur? And you probably default and think, well, those are the billionaires who everything they do, everything they touch turns to gold. No, the phrase serial entrepreneur is someone who tries and fails and tries again and again. And even out of those that enjoy the status of serial entrepreneurs, they by far have more failures than they do successes. And I know those who are on YouTube and on LinkedIn are selling us courses and how-tos about how to be a serial entrepreneur and only be successful. That's great. What are you going to buy? A loser story? No, of course you're going to buy a success story. And that's what sells. And that's what we think is significant. But in this study of this 2 million plus businesses, the one thing, the big takeaway is those that tried a second time or a third time were 80% more likely to succeed. Yeah, put the numbers this way. Out of those that tried a second, third, or fourth time, 80% of them ended up succeeding for longer than the average, or in a way that they would say, yep, I led to success, and ended up either continuing their business or selling their business. Yeah, making money on it. That is, they tried a second or third time, and that's what made them serial entrepreneurs, and that's what led to their success. So now it's your turn. Now it's your turn not to create that list of things you'll regret at the end of your life, but the things that you are going to assign meaning to. Make that list. The 3-part, and it's not too late formula, builds on this. I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm not going to give meaning to things that are not meaningful to me. And when I fail, not if, but when I fail, I'm going to learn and transfer those skills and do it a second or third or fourth time. And now it's time to take this 3-part, it's not too late formula and put it into action in your life. Start with something small, pick one of the things and go for it. And when you do, make sure you leave it in the comments below. Let us know what it is, because we want to see how it works out. And by the way, one of the reasons why we fail to reach goals is because we don't write or share those goals with people around us. There's some accountability there. And thanks for being part of the Doover Show. Please, could you tap the like button? Because it really does help. And while you're down there, how about you subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. I'm so glad you found me, and I found you. Thanks.